Hi everyone, welcome back. Thanks for joining us today. We've got a brand new story to share with you. So let's begin. My name is Anthony, and this is the story of how my wife, Dorothy, won $9 million and decided to divorce me. But before we get to that, let me take you back to the beginning, before everything fell apart. I met Dorothy on Facebook. We were in the same group, and one day, I saw her comment on a post. I replied, and that led to a short back and forth. Her bio caught my attention. It was funny. So I brought it up, and we had a good laugh about it. Our conversations didn't stop there. Over time, we started chatting more often, and before I knew it, she had become a part of my daily routine. Turns out, she didn't even live far from me. A lot of people rush into things online. They meet, they text for a couple of days, and boom, instant relationship. But Dorothy and I weren't like that. We talked. Late-night conversations that stretched into the early morning, diving into everything. Our goals, our childhoods, what we wanted out of life. And the craziest thing? She was exactly who she said she was. No filters, no fake personality, just to impress me. Who she was in the messages was exactly who she was in real life. When we finally met up, it wasn't awkward or weird. It felt natural, like we had known each other for years. We took things slowly. It was just easy. And when something feels that easy, you start to think, this could be the person I spend my life with. And for a while, that's exactly what I thought. Then, after months of dating, I proposed. And she said yes. Simple as that. Dorothy's family was skeptical of the online relationship. Meeting Dorothy's family for the first time felt like stepping into an interview where I wasn't sure if I had already failed. They were polite, but I could tell from the way her father studied me, measuring every word I said, every movement I made, that he wasn't completely sold on me. Her mother wasn't as intense, but there was this underlying skepticism in her eyes, like she was waiting for me to prove her worst fears right. I got it. If I had a daughter, I'd want to be sure the man she was marrying wasn't some fraud, especially since Dorothy and I had met online. That was the biggest issue for them. They didn't trust the idea that real love could come from swiping on a screen. To them, a relationship needed deep roots, family connections, mutual friends, a history that went beyond a couple of profile pictures, and a clever bio. From their perspective, I could have been anyone. I could have lied about everything. And if I could lie, I could also leave. That's what they feared the most, me walking away someday and leaving their daughter with nothing. I overheard her father say it once when he thought I wasn't listening. What if he just decides he's done with her? What happens to Dorothy then? It stung because I had never given them a reason to doubt my intentions, but in their minds, it wasn't about who I was. It was about what could happen. So, before we got married, they sat Dorothy down and told her they wanted her to get a prenup. Not as a way to protect me or to make things fair. No, this was purely about protecting her. They wanted to make sure that no matter what happened in the future, she wouldn't end up heartbroken and broke. She hesitated at first. She told them she trusted me, that I wasn't the kind of man who would screw her over. But they didn't budge. They made it clear that without a prenup, they wouldn't support the marriage. When Dorothy finally brought it up to me, she was nervous. She didn't want to ask me to sign it, but she also didn't want to go against her family. I remember her saying, "It's not that I don't trust you. It's just my parents. They're scared." I didn't argue. I wasn't offended. If anything, I took it as a sign that they loved their daughter. But I also knew what signing that prenup meant. It meant that, in their eyes, I was still an outsider. A risk. Someone who had to be managed just in case things went south. The prenup itself was airtight. It was written to be as ironclad as possible, designed to make sure neither of us could contest it in the future. The biggest clause was simple but brutal. In the event of a divorce, all assets, both personal and marital, would be split 50-50, regardless of who initiated the filing. That meant that if I had $1 million before we got married and things fell apart, she'd walk away with half of it. If she built an empire on her own, I'd be entitled to half of that too. It worked both ways, but let's be honest, this wasn't about protecting me. And just to make sure neither of us could ever challenge it in court, the agreement included a waiver preventing either party from contesting it later. Once we signed, that was it. No loopholes, no appeals, no changing our minds when emotions got in the way. I had a lawyer look at it. He read it twice, then looked at me and said, "You sure about this?" He wasn't trying to scare me. He just wanted me to understand what I was agreeing to. But I wasn't marrying Dorothy because of money. I was marrying her because I loved her, because I thought we had something real. So I signed. Looking back, I realize now that love can make you blind. At the beginning of our marriage, Dorothy was everything I had hoped for in a wife. She was loving, supportive, and always there for me. We had our fair share of disagreements, but nothing serious enough to make me question our relationship. If anything, those little arguments just made us feel like a normal couple. We laughed a lot, we shared everything, and I truly believed we had built something solid. She used to leave handwritten notes at my lunch, things like "Have a great day, love you," or "Can't wait to see you tonight." Small gestures, but they mattered. They reminded me that she cared. But somewhere along the way, things changed. It was gradual, almost unnoticeable at first. She stopped leaving the notes, stopped greeting me at the door when I got home, stopped asking how my day was. The little moments that once made our relationship feel special just disappeared. At first, I figured it was just a rough patch, the kind that all marriages go through. But as time passed, I realized this wasn't just a phase. She became more materialistic, too. She took an interest in expensive clothes, designer handbags, and fancy dinners. Again, nothing wrong with wanting nice things, but it felt like she started valuing stuff more than our relationship. The same woman who used to love our cozy movie nights at home now seemed unimpressed with anything that wasn't extravagant. She'd scroll through social media, pointing out things other women had, cars, jewelry, vacations, and say things like, "We should be doing more." It was like I wasn't enough anymore. And then she became secretive, always on her phone constantly, texting with the screen tilted away from me, and the calls too. She'd step outside, lowering her voice just enough that I couldn't make out the words. When I asked who she was talking to, she'd shrug it off or say, "It's nothing important." It felt like something was happening right in front of me, and I just didn't have all the pieces yet. Our marriage had seen rough days before, but this was different. What I didn't know was that while I was worrying about our marriage, she had just become a millionaire overnight. Dorothy had won $9 million in the lottery, and she didn't tell a soul. Not me, not her closest friends, not even her family. Instead of celebrating together or considering what this could mean for us as a couple, she immediately went into damage control mode. Before the money had even been fully processed, she had already scheduled a meeting with a divorce lawyer. That was her first move. Her first instinct was to figure out how to cut me out of it completely. She started planning everything in secret. She didn't want to raise any red flags, so she took her time, making sure it all looked natural. She opened a brand new bank account and slowly began moving the money over, bit by bit, making sure there was no sudden influx that could trigger suspicion. She was careful, and for a while she had me fooled. I never in a million years thought she was hiding something this big. She thought she was in the clear, but she was wrong. One night, everything fell into place. It was a pure accident. Dorothy had been up late working on her laptop, and at some point, she must have fallen asleep before shutting it down. When I walked into the bedroom, I saw the glow of the screen still on. She was fast asleep. I reached for the laptop, planning to close it. That's when I saw that the laptop was on because a Windows OS update had finished, and the screen was showing her email inbox. I wasn't trying to snoop, but something caught my eye. An email subject line, bold and unread, "Lottery claim confirmation." My first thought? Scam. We all get those ridiculous emails about fake lottery winnings, right? Some scammer probably sent her one, and she hadn't deleted it yet. But what if it was official? I hesitated for a second, my finger hovering over the trackpad. Then curiosity won. I clicked, and that's when my stomach dropped. It wasn't a scam. It was real. There was a claim number, official confirmation, and a breakdown of the winnings. My wife had won $9 million, and she never told me. I could feel my pulse as I scrolled through other emails. I found transaction receipts, bank transfers. She had moved money into a brand new, separate account. I had to sit down at this point, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Why would she keep this from me? Why was she hiding it? And then, at the very top of her inbox, I saw another email. From a divorce lawyer. Subject: Next steps in filing. I realized she had already decided to cut me out, to take the money and run. I looked over at her, still asleep, completely unaware that her secret was no longer a secret. My first instinct was to wake her up and demand answers, to ask her how long she had been planning to throw me out like garbage. But something inside me told me to wait. If she thought I was still in the dark, I had the advantage. So I took a deep breath, closed the laptop, acted like I saw nothing, and then I waited. The day Dorothy filed for divorce, she walked into the house with a look of victory on her face. She held the divorce papers in her hand. I was sitting on the couch, scrolling through my phone. She stood in front of me, lifting the stack of legal documents slightly as if presenting evidence of her newfound freedom. "We need to talk," she said, her tone controlled and rehearsed. I looked up at her. She was expecting a reaction, shock, anger, maybe even desperation. But I had spent the last few weeks preparing for this. I had gone over every possibility and played out every scenario in my mind. And now, as she stood there waiting, I simply smiled. "All right," I said, my voice even, betraying nothing. "We'll handle it." I don't think this was the reaction she had planned for. She probably wanted me to fall apart, to demand answers, to plead with her. Instead, I was calm. "You're taking this well," she said after a pause, trying to read me. I leaned back against the couch, still holding that same quiet smile. "I'll sign soon enough," I told her, then got up and walked past her. The next morning, I took the divorce papers straight to my lawyer. He had been expecting me. I had called him the night before, letting him know what was coming. He scanned through the documents with the practiced eye of someone who had seen cases like this 100 times before. I stayed quiet, watching him flip through the pages. He already knew what I was waiting for. A few minutes later, he put the papers down and looked at me. There was no surprise in his expression, just a small nod. "Sign it," he said, sliding a pen across the table toward me. And that was it. I picked up the pen. I signed my name, pressing the pen firmly against the paper. I just signed the papers, kept my mouth shut, and let things play out. What she didn't realize was that by making the first move, she set off a chain reaction she couldn't undo. The prenup, everything we owned, both together and separately, had to be split right down the middle. I knew she hadn't thought this through. She assumed she had all the control and was getting out of this marriage with millions stashed away in a secret account. But the moment I filed my counterclaim in court, reality hit her. During the hearing, my lawyer laid it all out. Half of everything. Not just the house, the cars, or the savings we had together. No, half of her $9 million. The money she thought she had hidden from me. That jackpot wasn't just hers anymore, it was mine too. I remember the way she kept shaking her head, flipping through the prenup like she could somehow find a way out. She even whispered to her lawyer, probably asking if there was something, anything, that could undo this. She couldn't claim she didn't understand what she was signing, because her family was the one who made sure it was ironclad before we even got married. For the first time, she understood. She had played herself. I didn't cheat her. I didn't manipulate her. She was the one who put this deal in place. She was the one who filed for divorce first. And now, she was the one losing half of the jackpot. I could see the regret all over her face. But it was too late. The law was the law, and there was no getting out of this one. Dorothy tried to undo the damage when she realized there was no way out. She called me after the court hearing. "Anthony, listen," she started, her voice dripping with the kind of fake sincerity that almost made me laugh. "We don't have to do this. We don't have to drag this into the courts. Lawyers are expensive, and you know how these things can get ugly." She reached across, touching my hand like we were still a team. "We can work this out between us. Just you and me." I looked at her. I saw nothing but desperation. She had played the game thinking she had already won, but now that the rules had turned against her, she wanted to call it off. I pulled my hand away. Dorothy, I said, keeping my voice calm and steady. You already filed. You made your choice. She wasn't expecting me to be this firm. But we don't have to go through with it. She pushed, her voice getting tighter. It's not too late. We can just drop it. I shook my head. No, you can't just drop it. A divorce filing is official. It's on record. You can't take it back just because you change your mind. I let the words sink in. Her eyes darted away like she was trying to calculate another way out. But there wasn't one. When she realized I wasn't going to budge, she shifted to Plan B. She lawyered up again and tried to fight the prenup. I had expected this. It was her last shot at escaping the mess she created. She went to court claiming she was pressured into signing the agreement, that it wasn't fair, that she had been manipulated. But the problem was, she had no case. Dorothy had legal representation when she signed. She had time to read through it, understand it, and ask questions. The prenup wasn't something I had snuck in at the last second. It had been her own family's idea. They had pushed for it to protect her. And now, that same document was the reason she was losing half of her jackpot. The judge didn't waste time. The ruling was clear and final. The prenup was fully enforceable, and she had to hand over 50% of the $9 million. She tried one last thing, arguing that she had been forced to sign under pressure, that the agreement wasn't truly fair. But it was too late. The judge shut it down immediately. She had signed willingly, with a lawyer present. And just like that, it was over. I walked out of that courtroom legally untangled from Dorothy, and with millions in my account. After taxes and legal fees, it wasn't exactly half of her lottery winnings, but it was still more money than I had ever imagined having in my life. I should have felt victorious. I should have felt like I won. But I didn't. I had spent years building a life with someone I thought was my partner, someone I trusted. And yet, she had been planning an escape the moment she thought she could do better. That realization sat heavier than any amount of money ever could. I wasn't grieving the loss of Dorothy. I was grieving the illusion I had once believed in. I used to think love was enough, that loyalty mattered. No matter how difficult things got, two people who truly cared for each other would find a way to make it work. But reality had slapped me in the face, hard. I kept thinking, what if she had just told me? What if she had come home the day she won and said, "Anthony, we hit the jackpot. Let's figure this out together." Would things have been different? Maybe. Maybe not. But at least I would have known who I was dealing with. At least I wouldn't have spent those last few months sleeping next to someone who had already written me out of her future. Looking back, I realized something that I wish I had understood earlier. Money doesn't change people. It reveals them. Dorothy didn't become selfish and deceitful because she won the lottery. She had always been that way. The money just gave her the freedom to act on it. And me? I learned the hard way that trust is not something to give blindly, no matter how much you love someone. People will tell you who they are, not with their words, but with their actions. And when they do, believe them. So now, I turn it over to you. What would you have done in my shoes? If you found out your spouse was secretly planning to leave you after hitting it big, how would you have handled it? Would you have confronted them? Played it smart like I did? Or walk away entirely? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And with that, we've reached the end of today's story. Thanks for sticking with me through this one. If you found this story interesting, don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll catch you in the next one.